Good afternoon, everyone. We're still in day one of the 2020 Sustaining Colorado Watersheds Conference, and we're so glad that you're here. We are doing this as business as unusual. Never did we expect that we would be putting on a conference like this, but so far so good, and we hope that you're having a good experience. So we're here for session 2, which is focused on financial, legal, and social tools to keep water flowing in rivers. I'm Jayla Poppleton. I'm the Executive Director at Water Education Colorado. We're one of the conference hosts, and I want to give a quick shout out to all of the sponsors who you see here on the slide that make this conference possible. We're going to go through a few housekeeping items, such as how to use Mentimeter. If you've been with us this morning and through the early afternoon session, you've been doing this already. You're going to navigate to menti.com on your computer or your phone and enter the code that you see on that screen. And then you'll have the opportunity to answer various prompts to interact with our presenters during this session. Please be respectful and professional with your responses. We will use a question box at the end in Menti to have question and answer time with our panelists. You can use the GoToWebinar question box for any technical issues. And we will be moving fairly quickly, so we just encourage you to stick with us and follow along. This session is organized into 3 sections, and I'm going to introduce the panelists who are part of our first section first. And those include Molly Mugglestone. Molly is the Director of Colorado Policy and Communications for Business for Water Stewardship. They're a very cool organization that we partner with at Water Education Colorado. They work to be the business voice for the Colorado River. They're a network of businesses focused on securing water for business, nature, and communities, and Molly's been working with them for 8 years and has 20 years previously of other public policy and nonprofit advocacy and public affairs experience. And then her colleague, Todd Reeves, is also here with us from, are you in Oregon, Todd? The Bonneville Environmental Foundation. He's their CEO, and in that capacity, he's also the Director of Business for Water Stewardship. And he has a really impressive resume. He's worked on hundreds of water restoration and model watershed projects across 14 states and Mexico. And you can read more about him and his speaker bio online. So the 2 of them are going to be tackling private funding, private investments in watershed and stream health projects through corporate water stewardship. And then we'll transition to hearing from Jeff Shoemaker, who's the Executive Director at the Greenway Foundation. He's been there since 1982. And under the course of his leadership, TGF, the Greenway Foundation, has partnered with countless public and private organizations to collectively create over $750 million of environmental, recreational, water quality, and flood control improvements along the South Platte River. So anyone who has benefited from that, including me, a Denver resident, can really appreciate the work that they do. And Jeff will be speaking about public investments in stream and watershed projects. So let's kick it off with the Business for Water Stewardship team.
Great. Thank you so much, Jayla. Hello, everybody. I am not going to take very much time. I'm going to turn it over to Todd pretty quickly, but I wanted to give a really brief synopsis of what Business for Water Stewardship does in Colorado, which is where I am the director. As Jayla said, we are a network of nearly 1,400 businesses working on sustainable practices, water practices, policies, and healthy rivers. And we, in the state of Colorado, first of all, I'll talk about this and then I'll get to this slide. In the state of Colorado, I direct a lot of our policy work, and we work really closely with the business community to bring the business voice to conversations around Colorado's water plan, funding of river and water health projects, and legislation that has relevance to that, like in-stream flows legislation. And we work with a lot of partners here on the panel, actually, in the state of Colorado. And we also do a lot of state work in Arizona. I think Todd is going to address some of the things that we do in Arizona. But we really try to have a policy perspective as well as the corporate sustainability and the corporate piece that Todd's going to talk about, and we work to bring those together to try to bring that business voice not only to the river projects and the funding piece, but also to legislators and leaders in the CWCB, and try to really have a cohesive voice from the business community in the state of Colorado. We've done a lot of polling. This current slide shows one of the polls that we've done, or not polling, I'm sorry, research and studies. This current slide looks at a study that we did with ASU around just how much the Colorado River contributes to our economy. And it's a big driver for how we live and work in the West. And in Colorado, you can see 180, almost $190 billion is driven from our access and our ability to use and work with the Colorado River and all of its tributaries. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Todd to get into the details of our corporate funding structure and how we work within some of the states, Colorado and Arizona in particular, with corporations. Thank you.
Wonderful. Next slide, please, when you get a chance. So incredibly appreciative of the opportunity to be here. And Molly, thanks for kicking us off. I just want to reflect what a pleasure it is to talk about this topic of how do we access additional funding for keeping water in rivers. And I'm 100% focused. This has really been a dream and a passion for me over the last 20 years. And it's been a wild and wonderful journey to experiment with all sorts of different ways to try and accomplish this. And some of the folks on the panel have been partners, many of the folks in the room have been partners. But what are some of the financial mechanisms that we can use to grow the pie for this work? And let's see, in terms of
we threw in this slide here to get some feedback from the audience, one of the questions that you wanted to pose. So
awesome.
If you want to give it a minute and call out some things that stand out to you from their response.
Absolutely. Well, it's a perfect segue because when I think about this, and I'll jump ahead a little bit here, but the concept that we've been working on for a very long time is this notion of building a movement around what I call environmental water stewardship, and particularly with the corporate sector. So trying to convince over the last couple of decades companies that it's in their very best interest to care about the water that's outside of their four walls. How does that watershed ecosystem function? What co-benefits does it provide to their customers, to their employees, et cetera? What are the water resilience elements that they need to care about to continue operating in this place? And so environmental water stewardship is the term that I utilize. I don't think anybody else does. But when I think about building this movement, it's trying to pull these new partners to the table, these corporate partners, and get them to understand and appreciate that unless we all collaborate and invest collectively in this watershed stewardship adventure, we're all going to be at risk. And so when I think about corporate water stewardship and environmental water stewardship, I'm thinking about outside of the four walls, how do we build a movement among many, many unlikely players to expand influence around policy, like Molly said, but also funding. So just to kind of move, so what's our theory of change? How have we attempted to do that? We have a very different approach than what I would say most NGO partners have pursued. And we've been referred to as, in some cases, the most conservative of NGO partners, or at least the perception of that. And so our approach, our theory of change has been not to lead with fish and rivers and rafting and macroinvertebrates and all the things that we care about in this room, but to really lead with what is necessary, what is good for business. And there's really a very small number of companies that really care about fish and cold water and recreation, and they have a limited amount of money to invest. So our thinking has been, if we can broaden that spectrum and we can bring much less usual suspects, much larger participants into the fold, we can have a bigger impact. And a significant part of that theory has been meeting them where they are and providing a menu of options. And so some companies may be ready to invest in projects. Some may just need to learn about water issues where they operate. Some may be interested in volunteer activities. We try and meet them where they are and provide every conceivable connection point to lure them into this environmental water stewardship journey and sort of hook them and over time build them up on this ladder of options. Next slide, please. Thanks. So just a couple of examples and trying to reference here that these aren't the typical and truly wonderful partners, you know, like Patagonia and Cliff Bar and New Belgium that we've worked with. We appreciate their incredible leaders, but really trying, as I said, to build a movement and bring in a lot of folks that we would not have ever anticipated would participate in this type of work. So just a sample here and looking at some airline companies, looking at technology companies, communication companies, trying to really build this movement and use the brands and the participation to scale up appreciation and investment here. And believe me, we spent many years trying to tap into craft brewers and all these folks that really do love and appreciate rivers, but just the magnitude of what they're ever going to be able to contribute and how competitive all these causes are for them led us to really strive to participate with a different suite of corporate players. Next slide, please. So just a quick reference point, it's been a wonderful and incredibly rich journey for us, but we've invested more than a decade, way more than a decade, but we've been able to solicit funding from more than 200 companies. We've been able to put more than 58,000 acre-feet of water back in rivers and streams across the country. We've worked closely with more than 60 NGO partners, and we've been able to support over 90 projects across 60 US states and Mexico. If you'd said this to me sort of when we started this work, I never would have believed that we could have come this far. But at the same time, it's a labor of love. Sorry about that. It's a labor of love, and there are some cautionary tales that I just wanted to share real quickly. So working with corporates, we've learned a lot of things. It's incredibly time consuming. It's not at all predictable. It's not reliable, and many of their decisions are incredibly capricious and whimsical. Just some fun examples, working for a couple of years and you'll get a phone call, our budget was just cut, we wanted to do all these projects, we can't. Or our budget just doubled, can you find twice as many projects for us immediately? Companies that you work with and 3 years later get back to you and say, we're ready to fund that project you told us about, is it still there and waiting for our funds? And of course it isn't. Companies not willing to understand that there are all these complexities, especially with water deals related to delays and complications and how many irrigators had to sign on and why is COVID affecting the implementation. Very heavy lift in terms of supporting these partners on marketing, PR, decision making, often sort of a full-time effort to manage client needs. In a lot of cases, always expecting that they're shovel-ready projects, they'll be implemented next year and done in that year, not understanding how long it takes. And so being an intermediary in this space and a broker and understanding all of these nuances and being able to work with those companies has been critical to make this successful. Next slide, please. So project types, I've got 5 minutes left. Project types. A broad range of projects that we've been able to participate in across many geographies that support all manner of different outcomes that we really care about. Rivers, streams, fish, ecological outcomes may not be super important to the companies. Next slide, please. Oh, all right. Most important type of outcome of river-related projects. This is great segue. So looking at this, really interesting. So what I was sort of one of my punchlines for this is that environmental benefits, all companies say are nice to have and they appreciate having them. But when they come to these projects, they're actually looking for very different things. They're looking for stories about shoring up water resilience, about volunteer activities associated with a project, about proximity and cost benefits. And they always say, oh yeah, environmental benefits are nice to have too. And so looking here, groundwater replenishment, incredibly important to a lot of these companies. Improved water efficiency, incredibly important. Food and water security, incredibly important. Fish and wildlife habitat, it isn't so important to them. Always good to have, but very rarely a driver. And so to sort of manage this, the biggest innovation that we've applied is what I call a portfolio-based approach. there's very seldom, if ever, a project that serves all of the needs that a company is looking for. And so how we've grappled with that and solved that is to always bring forward a portfolio of projects. One may be low cost but high visibility. Another may have significant water resilience benefit. Another may be located exactly where the company wants it. And to put this package together and be able to offer it is what's allowed us to meet their needs and move these projects into a place where they can be funded by these companies. So a couple of quick examples, just looking at some states that we all care about a lot. In the state of Colorado, the blue dots represent projects that we've partnered with, many with Colorado Water Trust, and Kate Ryan's here, and I know Linda Bassey's been involved in many of these projects as well. But looking at a broad range of projects in the upper Rio Grande on the west slope, many of these focused on water quality, recreation and economic enhancements, and fish and wildlife improvement. And if we flip to the next slide, just as a contrast, it shows some of the project work that we've been able to fund with corporate partners in Arizona. And the list is different here. When you look at food and water security at the top, Arizona, fifth largest, Phoenix, the fifth largest urban area in the country, fastest growing urban area in the country, comes up as a red flag for water risk. Companies are really coming into Arizona looking for PR benefits. How can they site facilities in the state and be a responsible water user? So really focused on water efficiency, water security, groundwater replenishment as some of the drivers. And then next slide, please. A quick example of a project we've been working on lately that's been really successful in partnership with the Colorado River Indian tribes in Arizona. This has never happened before. We have 9 large Fortune 500 funders all collaboratively investing in this project. We've got 3 more waiting in the wings right now. We're going to exceed $1 million in private sector investment in this project. And the reason it's been so successful, 2 primary reasons. One is on the lower Colorado River. This project can contribute to water resilience benefits for 3 states, Nevada, Arizona, and California. It's a turnkey project that directly reduces water risk in the basin. And so for that reason, this has been a place where we've had significant progress, and never before, as I indicated, have we seen so many large companies coming together to support a single project. And so of note here, if you were to really be looking for what are the environmental benefits associated with a project like this, they're definitely way further down on the list. Whereas what you realize is happening, companies are seeing this immense water risk in the lower Colorado River Basin right now, and they're moving to allocate budget, they're moving to understand the water resources and the risk issues, and they're increasingly moving to fund this type of work. So just wanted to provide you with a handful of examples, obviously a limited amount of time here today to share. But we've been so proud to be a partner throughout the Colorado River Basin, throughout other states, to learn and understand the different types of NGO relationships, needs on the ground, and to really grapple with this chessboard of pieces and opportunities and strategies that are required to help create a pathway where companies can fund this work. And so at this point, I actually would say that we're on track, not our organization, but society, to creating this corporate water stewardship movement where corporations are rapidly moving to adopt this notion that what happens outside of their 4 walls in terms of water quality, water resilience, fish and wildlife recreation, it actually is fundamental to their business operational needs. And so it's been a long time coming, but we're seeing more and more companies sort of get onto this train and move in this direction. So I think I'm out of time there, Jayla, but I'll pause there and we can look at this question.
Perfect. Thanks, Todd. Yeah, so one last audience engagement question before we move into the presentation from Jeff Shoemaker. Thanks so much, Todd and Molly. So if everyone could answer this question, what role do you think businesses should play in river health? This was a question that Molly wanted us to propose to you today.
As the answers are coming in, I'll just say I thought it was interesting when the mentee answer, the word cloud was coming up. And then also the one where it was asking, you know, what areas do we think should be funded? And I think sometimes those are different than what Todd finds when he's working with the companies. And so I think it's a really interesting line to play to be able to sort of, it's almost, we call it almost like a negotiation, like trying to sort of figure out what's going to help a company and then matching that with our partners like Kate and others with on the ground needs. And I would also add too that it's really helpful in the work I do in policy to be able to leverage those dollars that companies are bringing to the table, because we know that state budgets are crunched, and we know that the water plan in the state of Colorado is not going to be fully funded in any time soon. So, and we're not going to fill the gap with corporate funding, but it's great to be able to have those partnerships and to be able to show leaders, look, we've got the private sector coming to the table with really, and going off of what some of these answers are, driving innovation, investing, showing that they're willing to come to the table and put dollars down. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, I think it's really inspiring what you guys are doing. Thanks for bringing that to the conference today. We're going to hold questions until after the other side of the coin in terms of where does our funding come from, coming from Jeff Shoemaker. So Jeff, let's take it away with your presentation, and then we'll do questions for all of you at the end.
Thank you very much. And if we could queue up the video to be ready when I give the go sign, that would be great. Molly and Todd, great to be on a panel with you. And I look forward to hopefully meeting and engaging and making rivers happen very soon. Jayla and Carol and Sammy, everything you've done to make this session, this entire conference so successful. As I said to you the other day, the work of God's, and you guys have just knocked it out and continue to do so. And I offer you my thanks. I also want to recognize members of the Greenway Foundation team that are on this meeting. Ryan Aids, our development director, Devin Buckles, our water connection director, Lauren Barrett, who works for Devin as the associate director of the water connection, and Marge Price and David Howlett of Capital Representatives, who is our government relations team, and we've been partners since the Wellington Webb administration days. I'm supposed to talk to you about the importance of public funding for watershed projects. I'm delighted to tell you that the Greenway Foundation has been championing this source of money since our inception in 1974, when the mayor of Denver gave another Shoemaker, namely my father, $2 million from the city and said, here you go, and good luck and Godspeed. And as you heard, that initial investment has brought forth the results that it has. But we've also been involved since day one in pursuing all four legs of the River Progress Chair, as I call it, which is, yes, public, it's also private, it's philanthropic, and it's political relationships and dollars as well. As my team knows, I tell everybody when I'm asked, what do you do for a living, Shoemaker? I said, I'm out looking for opium every single day, which stands for other people's money. And so we understand what it takes. It really does take a city to save a river, a community to save a river. With that, we're very proud of the video that we have just completed literally last week. It's about 3.5 minutes. I'm going to use that amount of my time. And so sit back and enjoy. I hope you find it inspiring. And if someone could hit go, I'd be grateful. Can everybody hear me? Yes. So I'm going to blow and go here because I've got 8 minutes and 52 seconds. I'm going to try to take 46 years and cram it into 8 minutes and 48 seconds. Like all of you, this has been a hell of a year. I'm in my 39th year at this gig, and I will tell you, as is the case with all of you, I thought I had everything figured out. I thought I had every challenge pre-answered, and this year proves me yet again dead wrong. 4 of our most significant fundraisers had to be canceled due to the gathering numbers. All 10 weeks of our spring South Platte River environmental education excursions canceled. All 10 weeks of our summer camp canceled. We are delighted that we are now both virtually and soon to be in person bringing children back to the river, bringing children back to the very birthright of Denver. Like you, our lives have become far too virtual, but we will champion through this. We said this early on during this crisis, be safe, smart, and strong, and that's what we're trying to do today. I will tell you that thanks to the leadership of the Greenway Foundation team led by Ryan, we were able to do a virtual event about a month ago, 93 sponsors, $330,000 of income, $11,000 of expenses. So you find a way. You find a way to make things happen. But what was significantly important is throughout all of that, when states shut down and nations shut down, when a city shuts down, a river remained open, and it's always there, and it was always free. Because time is short today, I'm just going to start with our most recent endeavor that started in partnership with Devin Buckles when she was a senior planner at the City and County of Denver's Park and Rec Department. Devin and I got together and we said, you know what? Economic times are economic times. Let's go make something happen on the river. So in 2008, a River North Greenway Master Plan. David and Marge were part of that as well. 2009, River South Greenway Master Plan. 2010, the River Vision Implementation Plan. A plan is only as valuable as its ability to be implemented. We created short-term, mid-term, and long-term projects, and the short-term projects were based in great part on where can we find the money, starting with public dollars, because these are public, as we all know, they're public waterways. And the public should always be at the forefront of championing their real estate, in this case, rivers. I'm delighted to tell you that 10 years later, when we started the RVIP effort with $0, over $70 million, over 24 different funding sources, private, public, philanthropic, and political, have come to play, and every single one of those projects is done. And that's just getting started. Globeville Landing in North Denver is part of the Platte to Park Hill project, significant opening of an entire watershed that was buried in Denver. And of course, Carpio Sanguinetti, Heron Pond, again, in the Globeville, Elyria, Swansea projects are underway and moving forward. I'll give you 2 examples, large examples of public projects that also require all 4 legs of the public or of the progress chair, excuse me. The Chatfield reallocation project, 20 plus years in the making, over $180 million of improvements to the reservoir and to the state park, 20,000 acre of additional water, acre feet of water, upstream for municipal, downstream for irrigation and ag, and instream for environmental benefits, and a full 2,100 of the 20,600 is in an environmental pool. And next, we are in the midst of the next and single greatest investment of federal dollars in Denver's South Platte River in its history. We're involved with the Army Corps of Engineers, with Mile High Flood District, with the City and County of Denver, many other sponsors and partners at the state. And we are looking for $350 million just in one of the 2 projects that will come into Denver from the feds, and it'll be met with $140 million of non-federal sources of money. In other words, as you've heard from Molly, as you've heard from Todd, partnerships, partnerships, partnerships. What's next in Denver? Get ready for this, because I'm gonna give you a slow pitch question here, and that is, what do these projects all have in common? Number 1, National Western Center in North Denver. Number 2, River North, including the Denargo Market Project. Number 3, River Mile, a mere 62 acres of current amusement park that's going to be, in the next quarter of a century, a whole new city right on the river. And my father did say one day the best place to live, work, and play will be along the South Platte River in Denver, and I'll get to that in a minute. Go across the river to the football stadium. I don't even know what they call it anymore. I call it Mile High. That's going to be developed. Go upstream to Sun Valley, one of the poorest neighborhoods in town that is going to be revitalized and reinvigorated. 2 public service XL Energy power plants are going away. They're going to become something new. And then finally, Broadway Station at Mississippi, Santa Fe, and Broadway. What do they all have in common? 3, 2, 1, a river. So in closing, what happens when you invest? From all 4 legs of the progress chair, and the slide is before you. Under Devin's leadership, we did a return on investment study 2.5 years ago. I wanted there to be objective confirmation that what I believed in all along, you invest in a river, you invest in a city's economy. We went to Colorado Springs, we went to Summit Economics. They didn't know me, I didn't know them. I wanted there to be a separate objective, no possible favoritism being showed. We took the South Platte River in Denver, about 11 miles. We took Cherry Creek in Denver from Confluence Park to Cherry Creek Reservoir, about 13 miles. We went out a half a mile on either side, and we had them assess property values in 1975 and property values in 2018. And as you can see at the top, number 1, in 1975, 17% lower than anywhere else in Denver, the poorest properties in the city and county of Denver. Why? Because our forefathers did a great job of taking our birthright and turning it into literally a toilet. And in 2018, property values are 36, I can't even read it here, 36, 37% higher. That's 2.5 years ago, folks. That's before the projects I've just laid out have been made possible. So green equals green when you invest in your waterways, when you invest in the environmental, recreation, flood control potential of your community, you are reinvesting in a city and its citizens. And whatever we've been able to do to partner with, I don't even know how many hundreds of partners over our years, we are grateful to each and all. And we're asked all the time after almost 5 decades, when are you guys going to be done? And our answer is we haven't even passed first base. So with that, guess what, Jayla? It's 2 minutes and 9 seconds and I'm all done. There we go.
All right, Jeff, thank you so much for that. So inspiring to see the difference that you've made.
Let me just one disclosure, and I'm sorry I forgot because the picture's up. Absolutely, those are my 2 granddaughters. Esther is now 8, Prudence is 3, and Shameless and Shoemaker start with the same 2 letters. So a guy's got to do what a guy's got to do when you're asking for opium. So as you can see, they very, very, very much favor their mother and their grandmother and not their grandfather. But we had a little fun. Thank you.
They're adorable. Thank you, Jeff. Team, can we forward to the Menti question slide so we can direct some questions both to the Business for Water Stewardship team and to Jeff about the Greenway Foundation? So everyone, you can use Menti at this time to enter your questions for our presenters. And I will select some questions to direct to each of you. I might just throw one out there while we're waiting. So Jeff, you just mentioned investing in all 4 legs of the project's chair or stool, and I didn't hear what all 4 of those legs were. Can you remind us?
Maybe I didn't say it or I said it too fast. All 4 legs is what I call the progress chair. And again, like I told you, I was using my auctioneer RPMs here, so I admit that. It's public, private, philanthropic, and political. And I always add political because you have, everybody on this call knows this, you have to have political leadership behind any project involving a public piece of property, in this case, a waterway. And as the others spoke to, it is that convergence of all 4 of those funding sources that allow great things to happen.
All right, any questions? Sometimes it takes a minute for them to load. Here we go. So it looks like this is for you, Molly or Todd. What are corporate funders getting for return on investment?
Great, that's a great question. So in a lot of cases, they are under great scrutiny for scaling up their operations, growing, prospering, making a lot of money. And so they often talk about the social license to operate as a significant return on investment. So that's a primary driver. But in other instances, in other watersheds, they are feeling the very real risks associated with water supply. And so outside of perception and social license, they also believe that they're actually getting water security and they're contributing to larger water security solutions that will help them keep operating. This is a huge shift from 10 years ago when no company could get any significant budget for this work because the sustainability staff couldn't answer that question. But today it's becoming much clearer what the real return is on those financial investments.
Perfect, thank you. Jeff, a question for you. What would you say have been the best public funding sources that you've utilized as part of those 4 legs?
Oh, goodness. Local municipal sources, county sources, regional sources like the Mile High Flood District, state sources, in our case, Colorado Water Conservation Board, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the Water Projects Bill at the Colorado Legislature. That's just a few. Army Corps of Engineers, FEMA, Environmental Protection Agency are just a few. And then finding ways to get municipalities to bond together. There really are very few walls that go across water. In other words, you don't know when you're going from Arapahoe County to Denver County to Adams County. So when you can find regionalism through waterway engagement, that leverages dollars. And there was another question, I'll just jump on it. I see what makes political support possible. I'll use 4 words: leadership, relationships, passion, and persistence. I'm on my 7th governor, my 7th mayor. I'm stopping trying to count legislators, commissioners, and council people. That's because I'm the old guy on the phone call. But you never quit, and you always have a game plan to give someone that talks about vision, how to initiate a vision, create a vision, design a vision, fund a vision, build a vision, and celebrate a vision. And so, you know, when the Greenway Foundation walks in the door, they know we like to walk out with, as I said earlier, opium in our pockets in one form or another.
Awesome. Thank you so much. On that note, you guys, there's some great questions here that I would really love for us to tackle, but we're going to need to move on to the next segment of this session. And Jeff and Molly and Todd, thank you so much. And I know you're going to stick around if we have time for any questions at the end of this. I think we're going to be going a little long, and we did push back our social to start at 3:45. So everyone stick with us. That was inspiring leadership lessons, a good note to transition on. So the second part of this session focuses more on the legal or policy tools that are helping keep water flowing in rivers. And I think that we've got a really great story from the Poudre Flows team that's here with us today. And so that's going to be kicked off by Kate Ryan, who's a senior staff attorney for the Colorado Water Trust. And then followed by Eric. And Eric, forgive me, I should have asked before this how to pronounce your last name. Patyondi, who is the in-house water attorney for the city of Fort Collins. And then along with them, we also have Linda Bassey, who's the section chief for the Colorado Water Conservation Board's Stream and Lake Protection Section. She's been there since 2004. And then Dan Brown, who is a practicing lawyer with Fisher, Brown, Bartlett, and Gunn. He's been there since 1999. He represents various clients before the Division I Water Court in the South Platte Basin. And today he is here in his capacity in his role with the Cache-la Poudre Water Users Association. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kate. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayla. You can hear me? All right. So we are all project partners. We work with project partners in what is known as the Poudre Flows project. And this is a pretty unusual project that we would like to see become more par for the course in Colorado, particularly on larger rivers. Looks like we have a Menti question. So I'll give people a little bit of time to answer that. So the project that we are going to be talking about today, Poudre Flows, is a project in which water is treated as a property right that can be bought, sold, or leased. And the question here is, who should pay for water that is used for environmental purposes? So that's an interesting segue to this particular project that we're working on. Usually when the Water Trust does a project, we work with a water user or two, and we often partner with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. But this is a project where we're breaking out onto a bigger river, and we have a lot more partners. And looks like popular answers include the state of Colorado and water right owners. And if we have time to move to the next slide, can continue. So the Colorado Water Trust, we've been around since 2001. And we worked on projects all over the state. We were formed in 2001 by a group of water attorneys and water resource engineers who were wanting to do some business as unusual. They'd been representing clients who take water out of rivers to use it, and they wanted to found an organization that could partner with the Colorado Water Conservation Board and amplify their program and their ability to obtain senior water rights with senior priorities for environmental purposes. And the CWCB has had an in-stream flow program since 1973, so that's a pretty junior date if you think about water rights being appropriated since the late 1800s in Colorado. So our model beginning in 2001 was to find water rights that could be transferred to environmental uses and hold on to that senior priority date. And that's really worked very well in different mountain streams and headwater streams, but it doesn't work as well in larger rivers in Colorado. So when you look out onto the Eastern Plains and even on the Colorado River, we're just in the last couple years starting to work on projects that can be useful on those rivers. Next slide, please. So just a couple years ago, we started working on the Poudre Flows project together with partners who are assembled by the Poudre Runs Through It program through Colorado State University. And we've been working with water users who wanted to make a difference on the Cache-la-Poudre River. So some of those stakeholders include the local cities who have water rights that they could use in a project together with us. That includes Fort Collins, Greeley, and Thornton. Other project partners are local agricultural water users and Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District, who are very interested in preserving all of the uses on the Poudre River. And we also partner with the Colorado Water Conservation Board, which can use water rights for in-stream flow, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife, which provides us with valuable recommendations based on scientific analyses of what water is useful for preserving and improving the environment on the Poudre River. Next slide, please. So when we started looking at this project, our project extends from the mouth of the Poudre Canyon down to the Cache-la-Poudre's confluence with Greeley. So about 25 miles of that segment is depicted on this slide. Up in the canyon where the Poudre River is located, there is a wild and scenic river designation, but down in the plains, when you get down out of the canyon into Fort Collins and then downstream to Greeley, there is no environmental flow water right that's been appropriated. There's no in-stream flow water right. And so we wanted to find a project that could work on this river where there are, in every section of the river, there's different areas and they have different environmental needs, but one thing that's consistent along that entire 50+ miles of river is that the river simply needs more water. And in fact, there's 7 different areas on the Cache-la-Poudre where the river can dry up at times. And it's interesting looking back to this morning's presentation on homogeneity and how rivers aren't homogeneous. The Cache-la-Poudre on these 50 miles, it's also not homogeneous. There are areas where the river can dry up from time to time because of diversions, and there's areas where the river builds back up because of return flows. So we needed a project that could work with the river in its hardworking state to boost those flows and improve the environment. Next slide, please. And so the only way we could do that was not just to change a water right. So our old model was to have a water right that could be transferred for in-stream flow use, reserving that senior priority. But on the Cache-la-Poudre, it's a bigger river. It's a really hard-working river. If you did that with a water right, 2 water rights, it's just really not going to make a huge difference to the river. So what we needed to do is find some way to add water to the river, which is what a plan for augmentation can do. Next slide, please. And so a plan for augmentation, I'm happy to go into the mechanics of it offline in greater detail if anybody's interested in doing that. But basically what it is legally, it's a way of adding water to the river so that there's more water available in the river for beneficial uses. So say a municipality has wells that it needs to pump, or an irrigator, a farmer has wells they need to pump. They can't always do that in priority on a river like the Poudre that's been over appropriated since the early 1900s. But what you can do is find ways of shifting around existing water rights to provide them to the river at the times when it's needed for what we call augmentation purposes. And so what this plan for augmentation will do is work with Thornton, Fort Collins, and Greeley to use their augmentation water. That water can be added to the river at places where it's needed and at the times when it's needed. It can be used by the CWCB for in-stream flow, and it can be protected in those reaches, all at the same time, not interfering with the existing operations on the Poudre River. Next slide, please. And as we worked on this project back in 2019, it became really clear as we were about to move forward with our project to gain a water court approval through its application process that we needed legislation to move forward. It's a very new project, it's a big project, and we needed guidance to ensure water users that this was a plan that wouldn't impact their operations, and to provide guidance to state water administrators so they'd know what the plan for augmentation should look like. And this, again, for the Water Trust has been business as unusual. We are not an advocacy organization. Our goal usually is to look for projects and implement those projects. We don't spend time working on advocacy or bills. But in this case, we needed legislation in order to move our project forward. And again, to me, just as a Colorado citizen, this seemed like business as unusual because the legislative process was so interesting. We started in 29, speaking with water users, working with Representative Jenny Arndt of Fort Collins, and trying to get our legislation into place. And our legislation failed that year. But when we came back just this last legislative session in 2020, we did a lot of outreach, we did a lot of talking with water users, and we gained almost unanimous support from both Democrats and Republicans for the bill. So I thought that was really interesting as well. Just another example of how water can be business as unusual. And we really had to gain that universal consensus to move forward. All right, pass it on to Eric so he can talk about Fort Collins.
Hi, everyone. My name's Eric Payandi. I'm a water attorney. I'm in the city attorney's office for Fort Collins. Before that, I was in private practice, and for a couple of years, I also worked for the water judge in Water Division 1. And amongst all the different projects I've ever worked on, this is probably one of the more interesting ones because it's you get to work with partners like the Colorado Water Trust, state agencies, our fellow users on the river, many of which are represented at least indirectly by Dan Brown, who's also on the line, as well as some of our, I like to jokingly call frenemies on the river, like the city of Greeley and the city of Thornton, who are neighbors, but we're competing water users. You know, I think Kate went over the plan in general, and I'm also free to talk about it in more detail after this call if anyone wanted to contact me. But just in general, Fort Collins' perspective is that Fort Collins sort of sits on both sides of the aisle here. The Poudre River flows right through Fort Collins. It's a really important feature for our community. The city government actually owns somewhere around the ballpark of 70% of the floodplain in Fort Collins, which is public land, which provides a lot of benefit as well as recreational benefits. The health of the river is important to city's residents, but at the same time, we take out quite a fair amount of water out of the river for treated water use, as well as to irrigate parks and those things. So we're both a water user and someone who wants additional water in the river, and that's a tough needle to thread, obviously. At the same time, we want to be a good partner on the river for our fellow water users and to not have our plans to improve the river really adversely affect our fellow water users and their water rights. So all those things, that delicate balancing act really comes into play here with this plan, where Fort Collins is able to pursue this project with the help of the Water Trust and our partners as a way to add new water to the river, while at the same time not adversely affecting other people's water rights and their operations. One other point is that, the city of Fort Collins, through our Fort Collins Utilities, is using some of its changed water rights to include in the plan. And as you might imagine, that can be a little bit tricky because as a public entity, we're not able to enter long-term leases or transfer property rights except for market value under our city code. But we found creative ways in this instance to where we can add water to this plan really at no cost to the water trust or the state. And we're looking forward to moving forward. So I won't take up more of my time or anyone else's time. And I think, I forget if Linda's next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Bassi with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. Along with a team of 7 other people, we implement the state's in-stream flow program. So this is business as unusual for us because typically, we do enter into leases and agreements for water, for in-stream flow use on a regular basis. We have used augmentation water to augment existing in-stream flows. But this is the first time that we, with our partners, are going to actually file for an augmentation plan to augment stream flows. And it's the first time that we'll use augmentation water on a reach of river that has no existing in-stream flow. So our board will make findings on flow rates to preserve and improve the natural environment on the reach that we're working on. Another thing that's different from most acquisitions of water for in-stream flow use is that here we're going to be establishing a framework, the augmentation plan, that water right owners can participate in when it works for them. So it provides flexibility from year to year. And obviously we hope we'll have participants every year to increase flows in the Poudre. And having that framework in place will make the process a little easier. We already have the flow rates established in terms and conditions for the augmentation plan. So the approval process will focus on the water rights that have been offered for use in the plan. So this project's really important to CWCB. You saw the list of partners that Kate showed, and for us, it's a really valuable partnership. We're happy to be part of such a long-standing effort. We've been along for the ride through 2 legislative sessions, and it's great to finally be able to use this tool. We're excited to play a role in helping the Poudre River by addressing low flows and dry up points, and that we have found a way to preserve and improve the environment on a river where we couldn't appropriate a new in-stream flow water right because of water availability issues and just, everyone knows there is a plethora of water rights on the Poudre, and I don't think we would fit. So this tool is great for us, and we're also hoping that we'll be able to use it on other rivers in the state. Thank you.
Should I jump in? Can you hear me? Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Dan Brown, and like has been said, I represent the Cache Poudre Water Users Association, which is almost certainly the most unlikely party involved in this, and it certainly is business unusual. The Cache Poudre Water Users Association represents all of the major water users in the basin. And so it's, in some regards, its purpose is the opposite of stream flow. Its stated purposes are to protect its members' water rights, to ensure proper administration, and to do most anything that's calculated to improve irrigation in the Poudre River basin. So in this sense, what is the first question would be, what is the Water Users Association doing involved in a stream restoration project? And I think it's interesting that the Cache Poudre Water Users has been involved from the outset, and in many ways was the instigator of this project. In late 2012, this came up in the context of a meeting that was being convened by the Colorado Water Center out of CSU of essentially the stakeholders, many of the stakeholders in the basin, with the goal of trying to explore if there are ways to improve the health of the river while respecting the working nature of the river. And so right off the bat, one of the first things that came up is how do we improve low flows and dry up conditions on the river? And I think the water users took a position that had some foresight, but it was consistent with their mission. It was the position we took right off the bat is if the solution is voluntary, market-based, and works within the prior appropriation system, meaning as we see it, the water users see it, if it's solved in this, if this water problem is solved in the way that other water problems are solved, then the water users be a willing participant and an active partner in such a project. And that's turned out to be exactly what's happened, is this augmentation plan is doing just that, in the sense that it's utilizing a tool that fits within the appropriation system, and it isn't a method to quote unquote take water users' water, but it is a way to make use of water in a way that's consistent with augmentation plans and other things that go on in the basin. So why the board? I commend the Cache Sapooter Water Users Board for doing this. It's not in the Cache Sapooter Water Users Association's mission, but I think there was a recognition that in this day and age, we need to provide a legal mechanism for flow preservation like this, or and one that works for water users and for all parties, or one's likely to be imposed. So that's why we've been involved from the outset, and why we continue to be involved. And we look forward to taking this forward to fruition, we hope. Oops.
Maria, can we get the next slide, please? Kate, I think we have one more question posed to the audience. I'm not sure if that's coming here. There we go.
Okay, looks like the question is, in one word, describe your reaction to the Poudre Flows project. We can all use encouragement. That's great.
I love that you have found a truly unusual tool that you hadn't ever used before, and you made something possible that previously was not.
Well, it's just interesting how far, even beyond this group, it goes. The support that we've gotten through legislation, through feedback, has been really, really useful. But having all the different interests on the river is just the most important part of it. It's really great. And it's what makes me think that we have potential to expand this model to other rivers, though we gotta focus on this project first. Well, thank you for all of the nice words. I'm not surprised to see complex and confusing, but I'm glad they're not the most commonly cited words as well. Thanks.
Well, then I think we have a few minutes for questions. So if we can transition to the question slide, and for the audience, just as a reminder, you'll use the same tool with Menti with the code at the top of the page to enter any questions that you have for the Poudre Flows team before we transition into the third section of this session. And I'll throw out a question while we're waiting for that first one. Linda, you mentioned that you think this is a tool that could transition to other rivers in Colorado, and I wondered which ones you think might be the most prime candidates.
I'm not at liberty to say, Jayla.
Okay.
Just think of larger rivers that already have a lot of uses and water rights.
Okay. And then quick question for you, Dan. You did talk about one incentive for the Water Users Association to be involved is to kind of, be more proactive in doing something for the health of the river before that was, forced on you. But are there financial incentives? That was the question that was posed to the audience at the very beginning of this session, was who should pay? And I didn't get in the presentation, or maybe I missed it, like, is there a payment mechanism? Is there that market that you mentioned that is compensating water users who choose to donate their augmentation water to this program.
Yeah, we haven't quite gotten that far, and I actually meant to say something about that and failed to, but implicit in the water user's position, frankly, is that they don't think their water should be taken, so to speak, nor do they think they should be paying for stream flows. That could be controversial, but certainly that's the water user's position. But this does create the possibility, which we hope, I think we expect to utilize as going forward, for payment to be made to water users to forego use of their water. That's what I guess I meant by market-based, is this, it should function in that fashion and not be a tug of war legally over who's entitled to the water. I hope that answers your question.
Got it. Thanks, Dan. So we have quite a few questions here, and Kate, maybe these are, maybe you want to take a look here and decide what you'd like to tackle. Or can you see it?
Yes,
Okay.
I can see it. I think, will structures have to be modified for this to work, is a great question. And the answer is yes. The legislation that we acquired last year provides that the entities that are working on the plan for augmentation will have to be responsible economically for any upgrades and changes to structures, and will have to work with the owners of structures to make sure that this is acceptable to them. One thing that's really interesting about this project is there are other projects on the Poudre River as well that are going to require upgrades to structures. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for different entities to come together and work together. There's also going to be a lot of opportunity for both conflict, but coming to work together from our proponents of the AUG plan and the owners of the structures. So there's a lot of understanding that needs to happen. There's a lot of water sharing that needs to happen. There's a lot of collaboration generally. Not all easy, but it does provide a lot of opportunity for communication. Let's see.
Kate, I could take the one, was the state pleased with the outcome? As a state employee, I'm very pleased, but we are going to be bringing this to our board at its November board meeting for its first look. And I think our board will be very pleased to see that we're working on a project that has so many participants, local water users on the same river that we are working to protect. And we've been working closely with Division of Water Resources to try to ensure that that this will be administrable, and it is complicated and confusing. But I think that if we continue to keep those lines of communication open, that it will work out well in that regard. And I also think that Colorado Parks and Wildlife will be very pleased with this. There are some, there are some native fish further down on the river that will really benefit from this additional water.
Awesome. Well, how about one more question, you guys, and then we'll transition to our last segment. Is there one that you see there that you'd like to tackle?
I could jump in, I guess, on how hard has it been to get from buy-in from water rights owners. In some of these questions, I'm seeing maybe a little misconception in that we've only set the stage for this project legally and structurally. We haven't operated it yet. So certain of these things are to be determined, as in how hard has it been to get from buy-in from water right owners. That's to be determined as well. But representing water right owners, I think we have a case to make that will be acceptable in the sense that it's clear that we've set this up in a way that won't be impactful or injurious to their water rights. And so I think what it's going to boil down to is they will say, well, if Fort Collins or Greeley or Thornton or other people want to use their water rights in this way and I won't be injured, fine by me. So that's my expectation from when we go take this on the road and discuss it and try to negotiate a solution.
Awesome. Well, I wish you the best of luck with that, and we'd love to hear a report back on how things are going when it gets underway. So thank you all so much for bringing this to the conference today. And with that, we're going to transition to the third section of this session. And we're going to shift the focus from first the financial, then to the legal, and now to the social tools that we're using to keep water flowing in rivers. And I think this is a really neat project that Zuza Boli has brought to us from Americas for Conservation and the Arts. And so a quick introduction for Zuza. She's originally from East Germany and came to the United States to get her master's degree, moved to Boulder in 1990. And since then, she's been active as a volunteer and advocate to support immigrant and refugee rights and services. And she's got a really neat background. In 2014, she joined the leadership team for Americas for Conservation and the Arts, which is a local nonprofit with international vision. And she'll get more into that in her discussion. But let's hear now from Zuza about the River Sisters or Hermanas del Rio project. Zuza, I think you need to unmute yourself. Yeah, I'm still not hearing you.
Not here.
Okay.
Okay, now can you hear me? Yes, it finally worked. I apologize. So the River Sisters and Hermanos del Rio is an initiative that was born with the second Americas Latino Eco Festival, an initiative that Americas for Conservation and the Arts is most known for. And second slide, please. Essentially at that festival in 2014, we invited a delegation of people from communities along the Colorado River, because the Colorado River is, hello? Oops. Hello?
Zuza, we can still see and hear you. Uh-oh, it looks like maybe a bad connection. I know she was struggling earlier with the internet connection. So let's give her a minute to see if we can get her back. Shoot, Zuza, if you need to, you can try logging out and logging back in, and we'll just hang out here for a minute. And please, everyone, stick around. This is a really, really interesting project. One of our board members at Water Education Colorado was involved in some of the early thinking around this. That's Jorge Figueroa, who was working with Zuza at Americas for Conservation and the Arts after he left Western Resource Advocates. So I've kind of gotten to follow the trajectory of this project through him.
Jayla, the Poudre River folks worked on a quartet that we can sing now if you'd like.
That is perfect, Dan. Thanks for having a backup plan. I'd love to hear it.
And I'm actually feeling a little hoarse, so it might just be a trio.
Okay, Kate's got it then.
Yeah, I'll go get my ukulele. Well,
A team of many talents.
Linda is actually an impressive beatboxer as well, so maybe next forum you can do that.
Is this for real, Linda?
I'm sorry, what, Jayla?
Is this for real? Is he for real?
No.
No. I've seen her on the dance floor though. She is impressive with her dance moves. Well, while we're waiting, I'll make a really quick plug for today's social. So at 3:45 until 4:30, we're going to have a video I can't remember what video poster social. So if you were at the conference last year on Wednesday night, we had a poster social mixer with maybe 20 or 25 poster presenters and incentives to go visit them. And we had, food and beverage and really got to hang out. And so we're trying to recreate just some of our traditions here at the conference. And so this afternoon, it will be via Zoom, and you can navigate it to it the same way that you have been with the sessions back in Expo to access that Zoom platform, but there'll be more interaction where we can see each other. Right now, we can't see the attendees as presenters, but you'll get to see each other on that Zoom session, and there will be a few video presentations that we will show with then opportunities to discuss and have conversations around them in that setting. So please join us if you're able to this afternoon. It looks like Zuza is not having any luck. Let me just check and make sure she hasn't tried to contact me. Okay, it sounds like maybe we have Zuza back with a mic only. Zuza, if you're able to unmute yourself, even if you can't show your video, you could go ahead. All right, we knew we would have some tech difficulties at some point during the conference, so thanks everyone for bearing with us. Let's just take a minute to have a little bit more dialogue between the presenters. Were there any questions that you all had for each other that were sparked kind of in between, the financial section and the legal section? Any things that intrigued you about each other's projects that you might want to ask? Todd?
It's a really tough question, but I'll just put it out to this incredible crew. All this work is so difficult, right? It's complex, it's time consuming, and we look at the scale of challenges and they're really big. And so I wonder if anyone has any contributions in terms of, going forward as we have less water, it's warmer, more consumptive losses, et cetera. What are the pathways to scale up this work? Are there any promising routes out there where we think work that took a decade, to pull together to achieve a big win, we could see that moving faster going forward?
One thing, I don't know about going faster necessarily, but I do like that the Poudre Flows projects and some of the other projects that we work on is a project that once we get it set up, it will be enduring. It's not going to go away, and different water users can come in and contribute. So it's in that way, it's going to be something that's well worth the upfront work. And not only are we helping like a little stretch of river, which is what we normally do, we've got over 50 miles of river here that are going to be impacted. So I think this is a really good model moving forward. And there have to be other ways than just plans for augmentation where that could be done as well.
So I think that's really interesting, Kate. That's a new model, right? That's in effect setting up a bank or a system or whatever you want to call it, that over the long term, the investment, the foundation has been laid, as opposed to having to treat every one-off transaction and, put 5 years and lots of legal. And I appreciate that. That's great. That's promising.
Yeah, there was also a question, I think, from the audience in the slides that popped up about how do you protect historical consumptive use for agricultural water users who want to participate. And there are very discrete legal tools that Colorado's put in place to do exactly that. And so not only are the banks good from a longevity perspective, but they're really great from a water sharing perspective, so that ag water users and municipal water users can participate when it makes sense to them, logistically or financially, but they're not obligated as well. And so then we can continue those agricultural water practices that are so important to us as a state and from a cultural perspective.
Okay, well, let's go to taking some more questions for this whole group from the audience. Anything else that you'd like to know from our presenters today? And one thing that we can do with Zuza is have her record her presentation, and we can make that available later for people to check back in. I'll just mention while we're waiting for questions that I do have a personal appreciation for what you guys are doing on the Pooter. I went to school at CSU and lived in Fort Collins for 5 years and spent 2 summers while I was in college rafting, guiding rafts on the Pooter River up in the canyon. So lots of good memories and good connection with that river. Thanks for helping it out.
I think the other thing that's really important about this is, so I've just have gone up and explored the Pooter just a little bit to find out more about this project that we're working on and gain some, you know, that real interest that comes from seeing and knowing a river. And it's a beautiful river. It's not like it doesn't look like it's suffering if you're going along the bike path, but I think it's so important for us to find more projects that we can use in urban areas using these tools. And I wish, it's too bad that we can't have Dave Merritt's tour of the canyon and the Wild and Scenic River designation, but that's something we really don't use in Colorado, and I don't think Colorado water users on the whole want it. So finding tools that we can use to work on stream flow, but also to extend through urban areas is so important.
All right, I think this is the question for the Pooter Flows team. What are some of the challenges faced in implementing the project and how did you overcome? But to Dan's point, it sounds like implementation hasn't happened yet. So maybe you could flip it to what are some of the challenges that you anticipate going forward?
Well, I think we all can jump in on that one. Probably our biggest challenge to date anyway is getting sort of buy-in legally, which required the legislation. When this concept was originally envisioned, I and a couple others took the position that we were thinking, well, why can't we just file an augmentation plan and use existing tools? And as it turned out, over the course of these number of years, and in particular the last couple, in order to move this forward, we needed to actually get a bill passed, which took 2 sessions. Quite a lot of brain damage, and frankly, the whole project almost fell apart if we weren't unable to get that legislation from a practical standpoint. So that, I think, is our biggest challenge to date, beyond just getting the initial impetus to get everyone together and get some momentum.
I'd agree with that. In addition, anytime you're dealing with, I think we have about 7 or so entities, you're going to have a lot of just daily challenges, even something as simple as scheduling a meeting or a phone call. You know, thank goodness we have Kate to help with that. It's a bit of a cat herding exercise as well, because you have, you know, 7 entities that have 7 different ways to sign a document. And in general, you know, collaboration in that respect is pretty hard. Aside from the substance, just the sheer mechanics of it is sort of an ongoing challenge, but one that gets us a lot of opportunities to have meetings and hang out.
Awesome. Well, I'd love to throw out a question to the Business for Water Stewardship team. Just, is a project like this, when you're looking at you know, augmenting a stream with water rights, something that your corporate partners might be interested in helping to fund? And have you funded projects like that in those types of arrangements?
It's a great question. I worked with Zach Smith, staff attorney for CWT, when, you know, long ago when this project was in the works, and we actually had a number of corporates that were interested in this geography at the time. but it's just a perfect example of how much time and how much complexity and how much work was required. And the corporates are looking to really de-risk and have, you know, a very linear pathway to water in the river. And so I'm sure we're getting close to that. As Kate says, the foundation's been laid, the tools exist, but in, you know, building up to this over how many years, Kate? You know, I don't know, 6 years maybe or something like that. It was never at a point where a corporate could see it clearly enough to say, sure, we can put money into that at this time. But once the foundation's laid, then it provides that sort of an opportunity. But there's probably a mismatch with where the costs are and the need, which is to catalyze this type of solution. And so that's one of the greatest risks with companies that we're trying to work with right now. Instead of just having them always pick the low-hanging fruit once the project is complete, ready to go, you know, the last piece of the puzzle, encourage them to invest on the front end and take some risk, but also get the reward that if they go in early on something like this, really catalyzing the pathway to do this, they could leverage lots more money, lots more water into the mix. But right now, that's a tall ask for these companies. Great question.
And I should add to that, we have received funding, corporate funding from Excel Energy. And so we haven't received the same level of corporate funding that we do for some other projects, but we've gotten significant funding from them. And once this is set up, that's a great point. So, you know, Todd was saying it can be hard to predict from year to year. And then Linda was discussing how we'll have different water users involved from year to year. So it should be actually a pretty good fit for that corporate funding model eventually.
Okay, that's great to hear. Y'all, I'm going to check really quickly if we have Zuza back with us, and I know now we're pushing up on our limit here, and we talked about going a little long, but it's just after 3:30. And Zuza, can you let me know if you are here with us?
Yes, I am here with you, and I can see the screen. I apologize. We had constructions outside of the office, and everything went black here in the office. So I'm now on my phone.
I'm so sorry about that. Well, I'd love to just take a quick few more minutes to let you go through a very quick summary of, and I'm sorry to shorten your presentation.
If you click through the slides, next slide. Next slide. So the festivals, yeah, have you heard about, okay, let's flip to the next slide again. So we have a youth programming that was envisioned with more than 20 different entities, and that then led us to create the family programming, because we realized that especially when you work with diverse people, diverse cultures, that a lot of times the family aspect is very important. So and so since 2017, basically, we have engaged youth in bioblitzes as well as in conservation action and families in conserving rivers and learning about how to be actually gaining eco-literacy to understand the connection between rivers and the flow of rivers back into the sea, that they are connected to climate change. Next slide, please. We have woven the River Sisters project into all of our programming, and really are looking forward to being connected to any entity that offers opportunities for families and youth to learn more about the complicated or complex issue that we have at hand when it goes about managing rivers and stewarding them. Next slide, please. In 2018, we participated in the Boulder Valley School District Water Festival, where actually fifth graders helped designing the logo for River Sisters. because they were presented with a problem and were asked to give ideas. The Latino Conservation Week was all about, we recreated along the river and learned more about the importance of river stewardship. And during the UCAN, the youth summer camp, the entire proposal was about, we created community art, making 12 water protector statues from across the Americas, and also learned about the Jayla River problem alongside with the Colorado River issues. And the fourth grade BioBlitz at the South Platte River with some education on how to keep our waters clean was part of that as well. Next slide, please. So last year we had a South Platte River environmental justice bike tour with families, and then also highlighted the Continental Divide and had some activities at the Thompson River where we actually built an eco trail on a ranch that is private, but so we engaged our families in those three aspects, all related to the River Sisters. Next slide, please. So this year we have been able to be part of the Highland Canal cleanup, where we collected 461 pounds of trash in one day. We did glacier tours. We had leaders trained with the Wildland University as crew leaders, planted willows, and also were part of the river restoration. Even though, despite COVID, we were able to do all these things with social distancing. Next slide, please. And so the Denver Sister City Park project is envisioned in a greater vision as a pearl necklace of parks that can be connected by greenways to really, just like the Greenway Foundation presented, can really enrich not only our water resource, access to water resources, but also our diverse culture. I mean, our diverse cultures can be highlighted that way. Last slide, please. Oh, so in one word, what inspires you most about the Rivers Initiative and Promotores Verdes? Next slide, please. And in the end, this is an appeal to everybody that is a water educator. Our stumble block has been mostly funding that we don't have money to pay for training or anything like that, because I have been running the Promotores Verdes program without any funding, and regardless, with a lot of impact and really a lot of enthusiasm from the families. But we're looking for climate change and conservation education connections, enriching and diversifying events. We do recreation and adventure, want to be part of greenway development and training opportunities. We participate in stewardship projects and connect our families to career pathways, do community art, and actually help enrich festivals or be part of festivals. So if you're interested in any of these things that we have been practicing or want to connect, please contact me, and I would love to connect with other projects that have to do with water conservation and water education. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Suze. I'm really glad that you were able to get back in to join us. And I know that was really rushed. So one suggestion that I made when we were still without you and you were trying to log back in is maybe we can have you record your presentation
Yes.
at a where you can really explain, and we can put that in our virtual library on the website. So people can really learn more about the project, because it is really inspiring, and that those social connections, especially for diverse communities and urban communities to rivers, and understanding the broader watershed that they're connected to is so important. So thank you for the work that you're doing and for being part of the conference today. And please connect with Zuza if you're interested in learning more. All of our speakers' contact information can be found in Expo. So please reach out if you want to continue the conversation. And I want to let you all go now so that you can take a quick bio break and come back for our video social event at 3:45. Thank you all so much. Great session. It was really great to be part of.
And
Thank you.
Thank you, and I apologize for the technical problems.
No problem, Zuza. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, we'll see everyone back at 3:45 on Zoom.